warm good morning, everyone. From our side too, I am Manvi Kulshresht, and I work as program advisor with Friedrich Ebert Stiftung. And along with our partner Kutz here, I welcome you to this very first podcast on current and future prospects of batteries in the EV ecosystem. I will give you a quick introduction to our organization so that you also get an orientation of why and how we are working on this issue. Friedrich Ebert Stiftung is one of the oldest foundations in Germany. It's kind of a think plus do tank. And in India, we've been around since 1980s, building platforms for exchange of progressive discourses. I work in a unit called Economy of Tomorrow or Socio Ecological Economic Transformation, where we are looking at the transformative discourses dealing with three mega trends in India: energy transition, urbanization, and digital automation. Needless to say, gender justice, climate justice, future of work, or future of workers are integral to our work. We are working towards creating a coalition of progressive actors, just like you guys, who can bring innovative ideas on table for creation of a socially equitable, resilient, and green dynamic development model for India, one which could serve as a roadmap for similar narratives globally. With this podcast today, we would like to initiate a multi-stakeholder discourse and weave the just transition narrative as an economic policy discourse with emphasis on aspects of social and ecological sustainability. EV batteries, they say, are the game changers as far as the mass acceptance and mainstreaming of electric vehicles is concerned, and especially in the Indian scenario. And it is our pleasure to welcome two of our young, strategic, and committed partners in this journey. And we hope to hear some positive news from both of you for EV integration in the current green mobility space. A brief introduction to two of our guests here. We have Nikhilesh Mishra. He's the founder and CTO of Green Tech Motors and Services Private Limited. Green Tech is pivoted to focus only on battery designs for electric vehicles and energy storage systems. Green Tech is a startup headquartered in Chennai, incubated from IIT Madras, founded in year 2019. And our second guest on the podcast is Santosh Kumar Jain. He founded the Lee Circle based at Bangalore in year 2020. Lee Circle is working to strengthen the global advanced battery storage raw material supply chain by sustainable and eco-friendly urban mining, enhancing the circular economy by looping the discarded Li-ion batteries to the cell manufacturers. Let me start by putting up a bit of an icebreaker questions. Nikhilesh, tell me, what was the first EV that you rode or drove?
Oh, actually, that's very interesting. The first one was a Tata Magic. I converted to electric long back, somewhere into 2013.
Okay.
And that was the first one that I drove actually. So that was more of the project in a way. That's where Gintech started long back, like we said. If you ask me in terms of commercial, probably I have driven a lot of electric. Today also I drive electric only. Obviously it makes sense. I have a Ather and I'm getting a Nexon EV also. So that probably will be more of a commercial side. But if you still ask me the first one, it was the Tata Magic that we made way back.
Wow, walking the talk, really. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, Santosh, what prompted you to get into the EV space?
So I'm a civil engineer, so I was fascinated, and that's how I got into the EV charging infra. Post that, only I got into lithium-ion battery cycling, because that was a void that we did see. Maybe in the further conversation, that will be the main focus also. So yeah, that's the reason that we are here, and it's a hot buzzing word today that anyone in this sector gets kind of recognition to work on the mainstream. So yeah.
Yeah. And do you also drive an EV?
Yes, but not on the daily basis, whenever it's required. So yeah.
Okay. So let's begin the serious questions now. Yeah. The government is pushing for ACC, the Li-ion batteries, LFP and MC batteries, but the lead acid battery lobby is quite aggressive and still, even after FAME 1 and FAME 2, holds 93% of market share in EVs. Nikhilesh, tell me, in your opinion, what would be the future market trends and the transition? How would the transition look like, including implication on the lead acid battery manufacturing workforce?
Okay. See, there is a lot of discussion between the lead acid and the lithium, right? And there will always be some advantage and disadvantages that is given. But when it comes to electric vehicles, the lead acid simply doesn't cut through. As of today, there is no electric vehicle running on lead acid battery, right? There used to be two-wheelers running on lead acid, but that era is long gone, because in FAME 1 era, where it was possible to get a subsidy on a lead acid battery vehicle also. Today it is not. So there is no EV right now running with lead acid. Okay, that is one part. Second, and even more important, is whoever are the big player in lead acid battery today. If you look at them, and I will take two names. The biggest one are obviously the Exide and the Amara Raja. Both of them are fully committed to lithium ion now. So if you look at Exide, they have formed a joint venture with Lithium called NextCharge. Amara Raja has made a lot of big announcement about going into lithium ion. So both of them are fully aware and fully committed to lithium ion. So there is no more of a fight between lead acid and lithium ion, at least in electric vehicle domain. Stationary is a different story. Leave that. I'm not talking about that. But electric vehicles, they are all aware, they are all committed. Now it's only a question of whether the market will be remained or maintained by or captured by the existing big players, means the Exide, Amara Raja, and all the other companies. Will they continue to be the big battery player in lithium also, or new companies like Greentech or others like us will be able to take out some market share from them, right? That is the bigger question. That question we need to see the answer getting unfolded over the time. But I don't see there is a fight between lead acid and the lithium ion anymore in the electric vehicle domain. It's just a very different story.
But and what about the workforce? How will the transition take place? How good or bad the transition will be?
Can you explain me a bit more on what you mean by workforce? Just to be
workforce,
sure.
as in those who are working in manufacturing units like lead acid manufacturing units, and then they being transitioning to lithium ion manufacturing.
Okay, that is interesting and very important, very critical factor. Because see, unlike lead acid, lithium ion battery manufacturing is very different. One is that it's not manufacturing, it's more of a assembly, right? So like how you do a mobile assembly or a TV assembly, it's very much similar to that, which means that there are different challenges. In the lead acid battery, your challenges are lead contamination, your health hazard associated with that.
Yeah.
In lithium ion, it's not that. In lithium ion, more of your hazard is towards the fire and the electric shock, especially when you are working on a high voltage. So now it works very different way. Here we have to train people to understand that what will happen if you accidentally touch a high voltage, positive and negative, or what will happen if you accidentally short it, or what will be the effect of humidity on the breakdown voltage, etc. So there's a lot of things. So the point is, earlier the challenges were supposed to be taken care by mostly taken care by the manufacturer. They have to ensure the safe working environment. Now it is more of a training that we have to give to our people. So the people working at Greentech, even they know what is the meaning of making a lithium ion battery, what is the meaning of assembling a battery. They know what will happen if you accidentally sort the positive and negative. So it's a very different type, if not hard, definitely very different, which means that the existing workforce, when they move from lead acid to lithium ion, they will have a lot of training, and it's going to be very critical. And the company who can do that, because engineer doesn't assemble the battery. At the end of the day, it's the technicians who are assembling, and they need to know what is the meaning of that. So whichever company can do that in a proper way, fast, reliable way, will be having a big advantage that way.
Sure. And Santosh, so in your opinion, what would be the implication of this transition from lead acid to lithium ion
in particular to the sector
and,
that we in particular to the sector that we're working, refurbishing and recycling, we see there's going to be a transition, but it's not going to be completely like there's no lead acid batteries, there's only lithium ion batteries ahead, because in the sector that refurbishing and recycling, we at least believe for another 7 to 8 years lead acid batteries are going to come in the same volumes that they're generating today. And maybe the challenge for the recyclers today in the lead acid batteries would be not for the scaling up, but to operate in an efficient manner. So yeah, that's where it is going to be. And as Nikhil pointed out, the transition is smooth, and in EVs are more clear because the efficiency of lithium-ion batteries is, promising enough, and the transition is very clear with respect to lithium-ion batteries in EV segment. So yeah.
Nikhilesh, you were talking about, how in the lithium-ion space it's more about humidity and the training of technicians as to how to handle the batteries. So one is gathering that battery performance is a temperature dependent kind of a scene, and is needed utmost care, and especially in India, like a 4-season country with regional diversity, different temperature, different geographies. What are the challenges related to managing the performance and safety of these batteries?
Okay. This probably is one of the biggest problem statement for India. See, like people designing batteries in China, they don't really have to worry about the hot climate. Means I will give you one very practical example. The Chinese companies we were talking to in terms of cell and battery, etc. Some people we were talking to, they said that what, Shenzhen is hot. I said no, Shenzhen is not hot. So they said no, Shenzhen is very hot. So we bring out the temperature, and the maximum temperature Shenzhen goes to is 35, 36 degrees. That's all. For us, it's probably a very good climate to be in, because when we talk about India, we are going to like 45, 48, maybe even touching 50. Very rare, but touching 50 also. That is problem. 35, 36 is not problem. 35 actually is a very good temperature. Another example I can give you is people generally say that South India is hot, right? I'm in Chennai right now, and people always tell me that how you survive in Chennai. Well, I'm not from here, I'm from Bihar, so very much north. And I am here right now, and people say that how you survive in Chennai, and say that what, Chennai is not hot. There is humidity, that's true, but it's not hot. Because Chennai temperature doesn't go more than 35, 36. It touches 40 on a very rare occasion. But when it goes to 50, and your vehicle is standing in the sun, the temperature is even higher. That is where the problem is. Lithium-ion batteries, they don't want to be at that temperature, and there are safety risks associated with that. But let's say if I make a battery which can sustain 50, 55 degrees of sun, and then you take that vehicle and go to Leh and Ladakh, then what you will do? That's a different story altogether, right? And you can't say the customer that, what, you take my battery or you take my vehicle, but you can't go to Ladakh, or you can go to Ladakh, but you can't go to North India in the summer days. It's not going to work like that. So then you have to design a product which can work in -10 also, and it can work in 50 degrees also. Not easy, very hard. So that's what is easier for European climate. They don't have to worry about the hot temperature. Like a lot of initial EV cars, like Chevy Bolt and many other, they didn't even have a liquid cooling. They were just relying on air cooling because the temperature doesn't go that high. And when they launched those models in climate with hot temperature, it failed. It failed miserably. So that is the problem. In India, it's a given. You have to work between, let's say, -10, -15 to all the way to 50. And that needs a very different design strategy. You have to take care for both the sides. So it's challenging, definitely it's challenging, but that's okay. That's how you design a product, and that's how you grow. And the advantage is that once you do that, you can do everything. So right now we are designing product for 50 degree also. We are designing, which we have some customers in USA where we are putting in heating also in the batteries. We have some customer in USA where we are putting cooling also. Contrary to a lot of people's belief, USA is hot also. If you go to the southern part of that is actually very hot. So we are designing, because we are making batteries for some US customer where we are putting in heating. There are some customers where we are putting cooling. All of that is possible because we have been doing that in India already for quite some time. So that helps. But that is the overall idea. It's hard, it's challenging, definitely doable.
That sounds so much like a young entrepreneur. It's hard, it's challenging, but it is doable.
So that's what is advantage, right? Yeah. Otherwise, how can we grow? There need to be some barrier which we need to cross.
Yeah. So I have a question. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah. The point is, yes, today we see major OEMs like renowned, names in the market getting fired. So what's the reason behind it, and what could be the precaution that they can adopt? Because one such challenge that we face is no matter which OEM, no matter which chemistry they're adopting, end of the day, we're going to collect them. NMC, LCO, whatever chemistry that's out there. So there's a threat that we see from the collection side till the processing and packaging of them. So what are the threats that you see in the sector, not just from the design point of view, but in the application side, and how that can be, brought in a safety perspective?
Okay, you want me to answer that?
For sure, please. I think it's an interesting and relevant question.
Okay, I have a slightly different story for that, why it is happening, right? See, the problem is if whenever you design something, you might be aware of DFMEA or DFM, etc., right? When you design something, you anticipate the chance of failure initially, right? Now, when you are designing something, let's say, means you're making something which is supposed to be there 100 numbers, and you ensure that your reliability is 99%, one of the 100 will catch fire. And you will think that, you know what, it's bad. 1 out of 100 is bad. So you will design it to go something like, let's say, 1 out of 10,000, and you will feel very good. And then you will put 10,000 on the road, and one of that will catch fire. And then you will think that, okay, now it's getting serious. So now you will design it for 1 in a million. The point is, when you are doing 100 units, you can't design it to not fail 1 out of 1,000,000. It's not possible because there are not 1 million vehicles on the road, right? You have not manufactured. So when we design a battery, and we have only made, let's say 1,000 number of that, I can't design it in a way that it will not fail when there are 10 million of that on the road. It simply is not possible because you can't anticipate. You need to see the problem to anticipate. You can probably anticipate 1 order of magnitude higher. You can't anticipate 5 order of magnitude higher. So to ensure a battery or anything, any product that will not fail 1 out of 1,000,000, you need to have at least 100,000 products on the road. Then only you can do that. That's what is happening today. There are not even 1 million vehicles on the road today. So companies have not been able to design it in a way that 1 out of 1,000,000 will not fail or 1 out of 10 million will not fail. It just has not reached there. The things are not so mature. It's not about, means a lot of conspiracy theory can be there that companies are not paying attention, they are not putting the right resource on that, they are cutting on cost. None of that is true. What is happening is that there simply is not enough vehicle on the road, and by the when it keep on increasing, the chance of means the battery design will be better, and the chance of failure will also go low. That's what is the reality. Because see, when Tesla designed, they didn't they put a very strong metal seat on the bottom of the car because the battery is on the bottom to ensure that it will not puncture because of something on the road and it will not catch fire, right? But then one of that did. And then they felt that, okay, probably that is not enough. I need to make it even more stronger than what I had anticipated. When LG battery has caught fire in, I think in GM vehicles, I believe, there also they had made some assumptions which turned out to be wrong. So that's what is the reason. It's just too early, too nascent. And whoever are the early adopters, they have to pay the cost for that. That's true. I'm getting a Nexon EV. I have heard about a lot of problems in the Nexon EV. I'm still taking that because I'm ready to take that early adopter disadvantages. So people need to do that, because if you don't do, it will never reach the volume where it will be stable. So we are still in that phase where it will be stable. That is one part of your question. Second was about what type of precautions can be made. Purchasing a vehicle, riding a vehicle, I don't see end user can do anything. All they can do is that really become a test subject, let the OEM figure out things and make it stabilized. But you as a recycler, it's very important, because by the time a vehicle or a battery reaches your place, it's already in a very vulnerable state. It's old, it's used, it's mostly at the brink of being in a very bad state. So when you do the recycling, when you are taking out the battery, dismantling the battery, you have to be extra careful. You should get some help from the battery manufacturer or the vehicle manufacturer to lay down the SOP to make it most safe possible, right? You already should have the SOP in place. What I'm saying is that you also will have a learning curve, and pay attention to that, because more and more vehicle batteries will come to you, more and more problems will come. It will be because when you get the battery, it's in the very vulnerable state. So be extra careful, especially when high voltage battery starts coming. Today it will be more of a smaller battery, but tomorrow when a bus battery or a car battery starts coming to you with 800 volt, it's going to be very, very serious. So that's all I can say.
Okay. No, I
That's
think
right.
yeah,
Thanks for
very,
answering it in a depth, deeper sense. Thank you.
yeah.
So
Okay, Santosh, because we are talking about EV batteries and the health of EV batteries. Um, And given that they are one of the most expensive components of electric vehicles, and they also propose an environmental threat in terms of their end of life cycle. Describe as in your enterprise and your own significance in the EV ecosystem for our listeners. What are the challenges associated with recycling and repurposing of EV batteries, and how can the battery manufacturers and OEMs help you in easing your business? I think Nikhilesh also talked about one point here, but give us more to chew on.
So, as I had rightly put in the previous conversation, no matter what the lithium-ion battery application is, might be in the portable segment, cell phone, laptops, or in the EV segment, or in the energy storage, defense, or hydrogen applications. End of the day, it is going to reach us. And we are trying our best to make the entire process safe and reliable, starting from the collection side. By giving the if it is a recurring volumes that we are picking it from their manufacturing facilities, we are giving the pallet which could be like an intact, which we are designing in house. That's where we start. The second thing is while transporting this, we are trying to make the entire container in it, so that even if there is any thermal runaway, any short circuiting, it gets arrested within the container. So that's while transporting. And warehousing, yes, we are doing it in the batches and not stacking above, not overloading, so that there's no tension to the cells. That's one thing we are considering. And in the process, yes, we are following a nitrogen chambered shredder. So that's a complete inert operations where the complete fire hazard is taken care. Just to give an insight of how a safe and reliable operations are taken care. So apart from that, our packaging post our mechanical processing, it becomes safe because it's not that fire intense. So that's where our process goes. And yeah, we are speaking to a few manufacturers to understand if the entire dismantling process can be standardized. We do understand on the commercial sense, there is a competitive advantage, edge that they get by having a different composition. But we are at least trying to have that standardization in the model, so that the dismantling becomes easier. And because today the volumes are very, very less in the Indian market, but 5 years down the line, it is going to be 30x. Just to give the magnitude, in 2020, we did generate 12,000 metric tons of lithium-ion batteries from the portable segment, and 2 to 3% from the EV batteries or hydrogen applications. But 5 years down the line, we'll be generating 368 plus thousand metric tons, in the Indian market, and mostly from the EV batteries, holding 95% share. And the concern becomes there because today we might have the volumes very less and very small for the recyclers or refurbishers. But if you don't have the ecosystem today to have, as rightly said by Nikhil, the SOP, standard operating procedure, how do you collect, how do you process, and where do you put these all? It becomes a complicated thing to solve even a very small mixture of it, because it's not going to be a homogeneous mixture of these volumes. It's going to be a heterogeneous, one from Greentech and one from the other competitors of Greentech. So it becomes complicated for the other side of the operator. So yeah, I hope we are significantly operating in the sector, and we are solving one of the significant problems in the sector.
No, I know so as well. But tell me, just out of curiosity, how is the collection done of the batteries? Because ultimately it's with the end user, and these are all scattered all over the place. So how do you do that?
So as of now, our work is not that complicated, because the operation that we are doing is with the last mile logistics or the EV operators. So we collect them by insulating their terminals and maybe packing it in a box, discharging and packing it in the box. And yeah, that's how we are taking to our nearest facility, maybe 60, 70 kilometers put up from the cities. And then there we discharge and dismantle, and then we give it to our mechanical processing. So that's how it's being done.
Thank you. Nikhilesh, tell us, Niti Aayog has asked 4 of the IITs to conduct research on aluminum ion batteries as a substitute for the imported lithium ion batteries. How do you see the future of Indian battery manufacturers in this regard? And also, how will it impact the lithium-ion battery industry? What will the current cell manufacturers be able to incorporate these changes? How will they need to, adapt their own skills and strategies for the same?
Okay, this one is a very complex question actually, or there's no straightway answer. It depends on how it is executed, right? Executed well, it can do wonders. Not executed well, it will probably even hinder the progress that is needed. All I can say is two things. One is you can't uh, be in silo when a development is going on. If the whole world is doing something and you try to do something, you better do it good. Otherwise, you will end up not having anything, right? So that's what I said. It's about how good you execute it. And I very strongly believe that people in India, they are very good technically. There's no doubt about that. That is the whole philosophy of why I started this company, right? But the point is that working in silo, there is a lot of challenge in that. Whole world is doing research. So, companies are competitive. When LG does something and Samsung does something, they never share between them what is going on. When Panasonic does something, they never share. But research is very collaborative. When some research is done in Germany and they publish some result of that, and then some scientist in Japan will take that and he will do some further research. The research in Germany, the guy is not having any objection to it, right? Because research is a very different thing, and the technology development, product development is a very different thing. That is where the problem is. When you work on a thing that is very different than whole world is working on, you will not get that backing research of the world that is there. That is the hard part. If you are doing a new technology yourself, you have to do all the background research yourself. Not easy. So when someone people say that lithium-ion battery was developed by this scientist or that scientist, it's not true. It's not like one thing that one guy invented one thing. There were thousands of research throughout the world, and collectively putting it all together, some scientists came up with application of that, and that's what we call lithium-ion today. It's not that one person on a one lab or a one company did that. So when you do aluminum ion, obviously there are backing research being done. It's not that it's not being done, but not as much as a lithium ion, right? Because lithium ion itself has a lot of further research going on. There are people working on anode, people working on cathode, people working on the separator, working on the additives that goes in that. There are a lot of research going on, and you put all together and you have a product. So when you do aluminum ion, or for that matter, iron ion or zinc ion or aluminum air, or there are a lot of different technologies being talked about. So if you are doing that, you better do it good. And if you can, then it will be wonder. There is no doubt about that. That is one thing. Second, and probably even more important, when you do a research or when you try to acquire a technology, basically always to acquire the complete capability of that. Don't acquire one piece of that. What I mean by that is, let's say you like what happened to a lot of Indian solar companies. They acquired the solar technology from somewhere. They started making, but within a year or two, they went non-competitive. Why? Because from wherever they acquired the technology, they didn't acquire the source of that. They only acquired that particular technology. And then you were making a 200-watt panel while competitors started making 300, 350, because they had the source of the research and they did further research. And then when same panel is making 350 watt and you are making 200, you can't compete that, right? So whatever research you are doing, be very thorough on that. And if you can do, it will be wonders. Because lithium ion has not originated in India. None of the research, at least majority of research, is not being done in India. The disadvantage with that is, a lot of people say that lithium ions can't work at high temperature. You know what? It's not true. It's not like that. Lithium ion can work at high temperature. It's just that whoever is doing the research on that, they don't need it to work at high temperature. That's why it's not working at high temperature.
Yeah.
If Germany or Japan or Korea had a high ambient, they could have made it to work at high temperature. Yeah. But they don't have. They have a low temperature. So you will find, if you just look at the data sheet of the cell, it works from minus 20 degree to all the way up to 50, 55 degree, right? Do you see a bias in that? There is a bias in that. They have negative temperature. So the cells can work at negative. They don't have 50 degree ambient. So they have a 30 degree ambient. They keep 20 degree of buffer and 50 is working fine. Yeah. If the same thing was designed in India, it could have been working probably like 0 to 60 degree or 65 degree, because that is more likely temperature. So if we do that research on aluminum ion and it works out, you will see that it will actually work out a higher temperature. So it's a very good decision, very encouraging decision, and it has gone to a very good hand. Those labs and the work that is going on. I just hope that is done in a nice way and the result is great because that actually will help us, right? We are a company. We are not a lithium ion company. We are a battery company. Today it is lithium ion that is making sense and we make that. Tomorrow if it is aluminum ion, we'll do that. For us, it doesn't matter. We are a battery company. So I really hope something great comes out of that.
Is Greentech already investing some of its resources into the research or manufacturing of aluminum?
Manufacturing, no, because any technology that is matured in the lab will take at least somewhere between 3 to 10 years to mature in the production, right? So it's too early. But we allot some not like fundamental research, but more like a application research resource on these things. Not only aluminum ion, but there are other technologies also. We keep up to that because, like I said, we are not a lithium ion company. So we have to be aware of what is the upcoming thing. If we don't know 2 or 3 years in advance what is the upcoming, then we'll go. We can't compete in that way. So we keep track of that. We do some research on that, but not from production.
Sure. Thank you. Santosh, coming to you. The recycling or the repurposing ecosystem of the lithium ion batteries is already in the process of being set up. It's also, at a nascent stage. How will they adapt to technologies development in the battery chemistry space? And also, can the plants be customized to deal with the, say, upcoming, technologies like aluminum ion batteries? What would need to change in terms of technology in such a scenario?
So, firstly, we certainly believe that lithium-ion batteries are going to stay for at least a decade or another 15 years, right? So there needs to be a complete technology change because today what is existing for lead-acid battery will not be operational for lithium-ion batteries. Let it be mechanical processing or the chemical processing. The process is entirely different. So for something which will be coming up in the near future, maybe hydrogen, lithium air, or sodium, we don't know how the process flow will be. So yeah, we haven't worked much on it, so I'm not an expert to comment on it. Yeah.
No, that's honestly said, so it's okay. Like we've been discussing, it's a journey where we will learn as we go. So yeah. Okay.
And one thing I wanted to mention is, as Nikhil had mentioned, we are also just not, a vision statement and said, right? We are focused on the global energy storage advanced raw material rather than just the lithium-ion battery. So we will be evolving as the battery storage materials evolve, but we'll be in the circular economy, enhancing the supply chain. So yeah.
Sure. Okay, so I think we are through with our serious questions, like the elaborate questions, and now we have some rapid fire round for both of you. I will ask you three questions each, and you have to be really rapid about it. Okay, quick and rapid. Okay, so firstly to Nikhilesh, who would make up the team for battery manufacturers in the future? What kind of skills would be required?
First, a lot of understanding is there that it need to be this domain or that domain. It doesn't matter. So new technology, anyone could be. It could be a person who is curious about that. That's all. Nothing else is needed. It's a very new thing. You can't learn by outside. You learn by yourself. So you should be curious. Nothing else.
That's a great answer. Santosh, who are the recycling, repurposing stakeholders to look out for in the future?
It is in the nascent stage, so any strategic player and sustainable team can make it out. There's no one that's going to be leading the entire ecosystem as of now because everyone are in the nascent stage.
Okay. Nikhilesh, who are your biggest competitors at the moment?
I will not take names, but the basic idea is that any company who is flexible enough, they will be a competitor.
Okay. Santosh, how economically viable is recycling, repurposing of lead acid or lithium ion batteries?
It is economically viable if you have a proper supply chain and if you're doing it efficiently on the long term. It's not a short term game. So yeah.
Okay, last question to both of you. Nikhilesh, why did you choose Chennai as the location for setting up your unit?
Mostly because Chennai is a great place to be if you are a manufacturing company. You have ports, you have good governance, you have power, import, export, everything is easy. So nice place to be if you are a manufacturing company. Space.
And Santosh, for you, Bangalore?
Yes, Bangalore. I am from Bangalore. One reason. The second reason is Bangalore is the startup hub, and we see a lot of EV startups grown from here. Starting from Mahindra, who call themselves as Bangalore as their EV hub, and Ather and Ola and so many others coming up in line. So yeah.
Okay, so then I can ask you both for your closing comments. And I would like you to focus on, how the listeners, and these listeners will be our day-to-day users of electric vehicles probably, and those who are still wondering about what will happen with batteries and whether should they make the transition. So one closing comment from both of you. Santosh, you can go first. Giving hope and direction to the entire EV ecosystem and especially the batteries function.
Definitely. Maybe I think everyone understand the economical sense behind adopting the electric vehicles. Today we spend seven rupees on the conventional IC engines, and the EV batteries comparatively 30 paisa, 70 paisa. That's just the comparational rate, right? One, and the second thing is definitely there needs to be a maintenance on the battery for a longer life. So if these both are adopted, I think EVs will be more fascinating to walk and ride. So yeah, that's where it is.
And also the ecological advantage.
That's right. That's right. Yes, we are slowly moving towards it, but still we are, burning the coals and getting the electricity. So yeah, we're slowly moving towards it. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And one significant point I want to put here is that please try to put all your waste to the recyclers out there. There's so many people who are really stopping this leakage in the environment, which is really going to landfills and in a way coming back and disturbing us in a lot of ways. So please be responsible for what you're producing, starting from the manufacturers or the end consumers, whoever it is. So yeah, thank you.
That's a critical point. Thank you so much, Santosh.
Okay, very much similar to what Santosh was talking about. See, this is the point where you should purchase an electric vehicle, whoever is listening to this, and I will tell you the reason behind that. As of today, even without a subsidy, electric vehicles are economically viable as long as you are driving at least 30-40 kilometers a day. There is a math behind that. If you are not driving, then you have a white elephant sitting ideally. It's a loss. But if you are driving, and you will be, because if you are purchasing a vehicle, you will at least drive 30-40 kilometers there, right? If you are doing that, go ahead, purchase electric vehicle because government is giving a lot of subsidy in that. It's already economically viable. So it's actually giving you a cost benefit, right? Now, I'm not a very big fan of using taxpayers' money for something. If you can afford it, you don't need a subsidy. But my point is, it's a new technology. If you have any doubt, this is the time to do it. After 4 years, 3 years, 4 years, when it will become normal, you will not get the subsidy. But if you do it today, you are doing or being part of an experiment funded by government, which ultimately will help bringing this EV revolution faster, right? So you are getting money for doing a research, which ultimately is beneficial for everyone. I think it's a win-win situation. You should do that. So.
Thank you. Thank you. These are very positive words from both of you, and I'm sure this will help in changing some of the mindsets out there. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure and also quite knowledgeable hearing both of you. Thank you so much and have a great day.